everybody. This is the Nexus Ag Update. I'm Chad Steinkamp, and a little different format than we've had here in past years. I'm actually got to be the lead announcer, I guess, at this thing now, and I got Chris over here in the corner. He's doing our visual and audio stuff because I don't know anything about that, and luckily Chris doesn't have a microphone in front of him. I got our guest today and a special guest host with us here. I'm going to introduce him first. Colin, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. Colin Nasers. I just joined the Nexus team about 5 weeks ago. I'm working out of Stacyville as a sales agronomist along with Chad. A little bit about myself. I've been in the industry for about 2.5 years out of college. Went to Iowa State.
There you go.
Go
I
Cyclones. Like have a tough weekend, but anyway.
Yeah, we know.
No, I grew up in Northwest Iowa. Grew up raising corn, soybeans. Kind of like a lot of kids did. Raised pigs. Did 2 years right out of high school. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. Did community college. Had some older siblings that also went to Iowa State, so kind of followed that path. Went down there. Great time, a lot of networking, did a few internships. One that, I talked to Chad about a little bit was the Answer Plot.
Yep.
Answer Plot team.
Yeah, he's a fellow Answer Plot alum, so we like that at this table.
So, no, did a little bit of that, and then, out of college, took a job back up, kind of in that Northwest Iowa area, and that brought me eventually over kind of in that Minnesota sector, and, since then I moved this direction and, joined the Nexus team,
Yep.
Being a little closer to my new home now. So
Yeah, so he's going to be kind of selling out of our Stacyville location, helping me on some things and working on that. So we're going to just get it over with. One of the former guys that was on here, Brady, he took a job here just recently with the Climate Field View on that side of things. So I just want to first off say thanks for starting this. He's part of the reason why we started this thing in the first place. So we couldn't have done it without him for those 4 years. He's not going to be gone. I'm going to try to get him on here once or twice every once in a while. So he's probably going to have the itch to get on here, I think, sometime here. So, but like I said, this was kind of his brainchild. We started this in 20 because we couldn't talk to anybody in person. This was the best way we could do it. So him and we bought a couple mics and started doing this. So like I said, I appreciate all the help and the effort and stuff. I'm probably not as technically sound on the audio-visual side as he is, but I can talk. So
well, that works.
That works.
Hey, and before we get going, I think it's someone's birthday today.
Sure. I guess it's mine.
Chad's birthday today?
Hey, Chad.
Yeah, it's my birthday.
What?
So the day we're recording this is my birthday. It's going to be out a little after that, but yeah.
Big plans for tonight?
No, probably have some cake at home and probably have some. I'm not sure yet.
The trend of the past few meetings actually have been what was going on in the year you were born. What was going on that year you were born?
What year were you born,
81.
Chad? Oh, okay.
81. So I don't think there was anything super important in 81, but I don't even know.
Except for your birth.
Except for my birth. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just know that I got a fair amount of friends that have birthdays all about now. My wife and a handful of our friends all have birthdays within about 5-6 days. So it's crazy that early December before Christmas, there's seems like a lot of birthdays that roll around at this time of the year.
Okay, Chad, go back into the weather and see if there was a big, huge snowstorm the first week of March in 1981. That might explain a whole lot.
That would explain a lot of it. That's why, we in our area, 91, we had an ice storm around Halloween.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
And in southeast Minnesota. And that class 18, 19 years after that was a pretty big class in our school district. So so the guy that's been talking to us that we haven't introduced yet is Ron Geis.
Yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, a little bit of background. I started a few years ago. In 1984, I started with DuPont in a research and a sales role in western Nebraska. And for some of you older farmers, and remember those real small bottles of chemicals that started to come out in the late 80s, I was part of the team that helped to pull those into the marketplace. And had Nebraska areas through about 1998, and then started covering your part of the world in Northwest Iowa in 98, and had a sales role until the merger with Dow and where Corteva was formed. And then at that point, I took the role of a market development specialist, which is sort of a fancy way of saying the chemical agronomist in the chemistry side of our business. And I've been doing this now for 7 years. Primary area is just take Sioux City to Dubuque and everything north in the state of Iowa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always like to have conversations with you after meetings, and you've come out at times when we've had something really screwy kind of going on. Mm-hmm. Like last summer, we had something kind of screwy with one of our test plots, and it's like, boy, I've never seen that before.
Right. Yes. So I have the luxury of being able to see all of the odd things, yep, in a pretty big geography, as well as there's a team of us market development specialists in Corteva, and then we Zoom together once a month and compare notes on the strange and the oddities, and helps us to find solutions, and that's really what we're all about. And then to cascade that back to our teams and to our customers.
Well, that's one of the things that kind of keeps us busy. I mean, if we can figure out those weird things or odd things, right. I mean, sometimes an odd thing all of a sudden becomes, oh, well, that was a pest we've never seen before or a disease we've never seen before, and then 5 years later we have tar spots. So,
yeah, it evolves, that's for sure.
So, one of the reasons I wanted to bring you in here, we kind of want to talk a little bit of a recap of 2024, and then some things, some thoughts on 24, and then some things kind of looking 25 and beyond. And like you said, I thought you'd be a wonderful person for that part of it. But Colin, let's just maybe kind of go over a little bit of what we saw this summer around this area here. I mean, I tell you, it was a year of extremes. I mean, we went from dry to wet, back to dry, and then we went to wet. Now we're kind of wet and frozen. I mean, could you set up a year like that? I mean, what did you think of that one, Colin?
Well, the way I think about it is, I mean, this is really truly my third year, and all 3 years have been different. There hasn't been a consistent year for me where, I look at it like, well, this is a learning experience. Am I going to be able to use what I saw from this year in the future? Maybe not. Mm-hmm. I could see where products shined and, where maybe products weren't placed where they should have been placed. Yep. That was the biggest one for me where, if a guy maybe gave up on a field too soon where, the next door neighbor over did something extra where, you could see some value in certain products.
What I saw was, I mean, it seemed like the guys that had a pulse on what's going on out there in the fields and hit things timely. And I've been telling a lot of guys, if you checked a lot of the boxes, you had a really nice year.
Right.
And, if you made sure that you had, the right seed and the right fertilizer at the right placement, you're timely with your applications and stuff. And you maybe, even though the prices of corn and beans aren't great, and still check the boxes of, well, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing these things. I think you're still well compensated for that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what were you seeing in your territory?
Well,
around?
I think another thing was drainage. Mm-hmm. The people that invested in good drainage were rewarded very well this year. I think a lot of people said, hey, you can just find these tile lines in every field. And then those that didn't have it, obviously you can have the best hybrid, you can have the best fungicide, you can have the best weed control. If my corn drowned out, I'm probably going to yield 0 in those spots. So that's the foundation, and then everything builds from there. But good fertility, we were able to power through an incredibly dry summer, and still, I'd say the biggest comments were, where did all this corn come from?
Yeah.
Especially, I know this is a little out of your area, but south of Highway 3, 270 bushel corn field averages were very common. a lot of April, May rain, and not much after that.
Yep. We, we were, April and May, we weren't too bad around here, but then we kind of had a little bit of a dry spell, got stuff in May. Well, then, gosh, we must have had almost 6-8 inches in the month of June. And really after that, then that was about it till early August. And we had a little bit around there, but we had just enough rain here and there. But I was actually kind of concerned with as dry as it was at the end. We just had no roots underneath some of these numbers. We saw some varieties struggle because of that, especially if it was a wet early, where it's like you got maybe one that's kind of a good root but not a great root, but then it just kind of pancaked at the water level, and next thing you know, we're struggling in that spot.
Right, but Chad, what incentive did that corn plant have with
Zero.
a wet June?
Zero.
To put those roots down. Exactly.
Well, even if it's an incentive, but then it's like it's still a restricting spot too, because I mean roots are only going to go, if it runs out of oxygen, that's it. We're just going to stop. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there wasn't no reason to. So stop putting the energy towards that, put it in the ear, and put it in the plant.
Right, and then you get a top-heavy plant that doesn't want to stand up.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, we didn't have much of that.
Yeah, we were real fortunate
we
that
were
way.
real fortunate with that, and I think maybe the weather helped with that too. We didn't have those derecho level winds or gale force winds at sometimes, but we got them later in the harvest window, and thank goodness the crop was darn near out by the time that happened. But
And that was one of my lookouts too, kind of getting in towards that end of August, September timeframe, going out and checking some of these plants, checking different varieties and seeing how they are withstanding, with, the shallower root system out there. And, from what I had saw, I mean, most things were good. There was a few areas where if we would have gotten that, that wind or, terrible weather, we could have seen some issues out there.
Well, we saw some cannibalization in some of the stalks too. I mean, you talk about the roots not having to go down deep. Well, then they're also not searching for that extra nitrogen, and that was deep too. So
That's right. Yeah.
So maybe let's segue into this a little bit. What we saw in 24. If we had the crystal ball, what do you think? What would be a do-over for any of us? Why don't we just go around the room with that one? Ron, why don't you start out on that?
Well, the thing, when we look at the end of the season and what impressed us more than anything else, I'd say the two things it showed were nitrogen management and foliar fungicide in corn. Both of those, if it was managed right, had huge returns. So why the nitrogen management? Well, when we put our nitrogen on, it is in a ammonium form for the most part that has a positive charge, but then that quickly changes with bacteria to a negative charge, and then the soil has a negative charge. So it's like, two ends of the magnet that are the same charge, and they repel each other. It's fine. It can live in that state so long as there isn't excess moisture.
Yep, and gravity.
And gravity. So down she goes, or if it's a waterlog because we hit a hard pan and there's no oxygen, no open space, then it'll gas up, greenhouse gases. That's
volatilization.
It's a yes. Yeah. So we can lose through the denitrification, through the leaching, volatilization. All those can have losses. So either have to keep that in a stable form. And we can do that with the use of nitrogen stabilizers like N-Serve on the anhydrous or Instinct with your liquids or dries, or even hog manure or liquid manures, or supplement nitrogen later. And those that did those things were rewarded for that very well this year. So nitrogen management was a real key this year.
Yeah, you talk to a lot of the seed guys. I know you're not a seed guy or on the chem side, but you're seeing more talk about we're using probably closer to 40% of the nitrogen after tassel.
Right.
And I think some of these new genetics, we were talking about this with one of our seed partners the other day. It seems like one way they're trying to push yield now, it's kernel depth. But when you do that though, you got to make sure that you got enough nitrogen late because kernel depth's all in August.
Exactly.
And I think that's where maybe some of the kernel or some of the yield did come from because, I mean, you go start looking at some of these kernels that we had. I mean, they were good, real good sized kernels considering the season we had.
Yeah.
So when we use more of those genetics, I mean, we're going to be more dependent on late season nitrogen. So, and I've been saying for years, we got to start talking about more than just one shot.
I think so, yeah.
I guess piggyback off kind of that conversation there. I know, Chad, you've kind of do some side dressing yourself.
Yes.
And I think if any farmer that has, old equipment or anything around, then you're capable of doing any extra side dressing or getting the co-op out there, whatever, to make those passes happen. I mean, the talk in the industry is, more times we can get out there and put something down, the better. Yeah. And with the unpredictable weather we've had, I mean, I think that's huge. You can't necessarily just plan for that one pass system and, hope for success. And I mean, like you said, just kind of harping on the detail of, having multiple passes out there where we can.
Well, and the technology's gotten so much better too. I mean, you go look at 10 years ago, who the hell knew what the Y drop system was? I mean, honestly.
Yeah, it was kind of new then, yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden some guy in Illinois comes up with that concept and it's like, wow, yeah, that's a great way to do it. Mm-hmm. And, we've adjusted to that. I mean, we got more capabilities where we can do top dress urea. We do have the capabilities to do Y dropping with 32. We had a lot of guys that did that last year, and man, were they happy. Mm-hmm. That just, hey, I need to spike in. Let's spike in another 40 units right around tassel time or right before tassel time. And boy, did that pay this year. And
Chad, we also have equipment now that's designed to go into tall crops, like, tall corn, without being, the old highboy kind of a thing that was pretty tipsy, but good equipment that'll get over a lot of acres now.
Yep.
That, is kind of fairly new that we're able to do that. If you couple that together with, I know we're 5 years ahead of our time here, but this short-statured corn is going to allow later season applications, because always the worry, well, what if I don't get that nitrogen put on? And I save some back knowing that I'm going to put some later and I can't get in the field. We're not limited to knee-high corn anymore. Mm-hmm. But Thanksgiving was just a couple weeks ago. And I remember after Thanksgiving dinner, and I mean, I was like a tick, it's just full. I didn't feel real good.
Yep.
But how many times is that our nitrogen?
Oh, that is our nitrogen program a lot of the times.
It's in the fall. We put the whole year's worth on, and that's going to last me, right?
Yep.
Well, things take away from that nitrogen. Roots don't go deep because they couldn't, or we had all that moisture at the top. Mm-hmm. When moisture's at the top, the nitrogen's deeper than normal. So all those things are kind of working against it. More later, or saving it for a form that's not as prone to move off target, that's all going to help that nitrogen management piece.
So what you're saying is, maybe don't stuff yourself so much at Thanksgiving. Maybe have one less plate, put those in the fridge, and kind of eat those a little later on. Kind of supplement a little bit later on. Snack later. That's one way to look at it, I think.
Make a sandwich later.
Well, yeah, let's save the pie for later in the day instead of right there at noon. Just that way.
Well, and to me, don't get me wrong, you can make that work, but it's more risky. I did some did some processing of my own at home, and I had some fall applied and some spring applied, and I farm in Minnesota, so we got a couple fields that we can't put it on in the fall because of rules in the state of Minnesota. Like it or not, it's what it is.
Right.
I can't move the piece to someplace else. I get it. But at the end of the day, I had a couple fields that were still keeping up with my spring applied. It's just the range was wider. Where my bottom range was a hell of a lot lower than my spring range was. So
on your fall applied.
My fall applied. So, I mean, I still had fields that yielded just as well my spring applied, but I also had some that weren't anywhere near what it was either. And it's just what it is. I mean, but to me, we've had years where it's been on par, but, we had you kind of got to go look back at what we had in 23 as well. I mean, it was a dry fall in 23. It was a warm winter. I mean, I think we've been colder already than the whole 23-24 winter.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had much frost. It was pretty much no snow cover, so it freeze dried all winter.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a lot of things going against us going into this year.
Right.
And, so we'll see what happens, I guess, going forward.
Yeah, and let's not also discount. I mean, we spend a lot of time right now talking about nitrogen, but let's not forget the role that potassium and phosphorus
And sulfur.
play, and sulfur, what they play in in getting all these nutrients into the plant. I think very good potassium levels, and that's been a push. You guys have done a good job here over the last 5-10 years of let's get these levels up so that when you hit a stress year, that you're able to still take advantage of what's in the plant and be able to extract everything out of the soil that you can, even when the soil and the roots don't want to cooperate with us.
Right. Yeah, we kind of lucked out too because the previous year we were kind of drier year, so we probably had a few extra goodies and groceries in the ground.
Probably left
from the previous year, so we were pretty lucky on that. Mm-hmm. The other thing you mentioned was fungicide.
Right.
Let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, foliar fungicide on corn just rang the bell.
It did.
So I think we were all ready for a big disease year. Some good rain in April, good rain in May. You guys had a lot of rain in June. I mean, what's the recipe for diseases? You had it.
We were getting ready for tar spot.
Yeah,
It was getting ready for tar spot.
It was a sure thing. You knew it was going to happen. So we pulled the trigger for our tar spot fungicides. Mm-hmm. And by and large, we didn't have a runaway with tar spot. Okay, so where's the big benefit from a fungicide here?
There was more than just one disease out there.
More than one disease, and I think the plant health benefits. Again, we had some stressful conditions, and the plant health benefits from our strobilurins carried us through and packed on the extra kernel weight and kernel depth that gave us a lot of extra yield where we used the fungicide on corn.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, as we've kind of gone on the tar spot side, did you see much of it in your territory at all in pockets, or was it just kind of across the territory?
A few little pockets here and there, and I'm not going to say anybody felt it was a real runaway in the northern part of Iowa. There were probably a few more pockets when we got down to more of a south central Iowa. And but the tar spot that did come on really didn't seem to come on until late into the whole cropping season. So potentially hurting our yield from the tar spot. We weren't quite so concerned with that, but we were very concerned because you start to shut that plant down prematurely.
Yeah.
That is that thing going to stand? Mm-hmm. And I think we were just late enough. If we dodged that bullet, we had good potassium levels in the soil. It gave us stronger stalks. I think there've been some emphasis with the seed companies on having more late season standability, even under problems. That we dodged the lodging bullet that could have been really bad, and didn't have that really big winds until we were almost done with harvest.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't see any in your travels, or you probably saw like I did, where it was like about V or R4, R5, R6. You started seeing a few flecks when it was starting to kind of die off.
I mean, yeah, exactly like what you said there. I mean, even talking with seed reps that have walked plots, they cover, whole state territories, and they've got a lot of contacts throughout the state. A lot of them, even walking their plots, couldn't find anything. I mean, It was very few and thin of fields that I could go into and find tar spot. It was one of those things where, you don't want to see it, but I was just like, come on, where is it? I was trying, it's like you're chasing it down, trying to figure out where this thing is going to start, and, checking different varieties, maturity ranges, trying to draw some correlations. And, for me, there was a few spots I saw, but nothing, detrimental out there. So
if there was one disease that kind of snuck up on us, it was southern rust.
I was just going to say that.
Right? So I've been in northern Iowa 25 years now, and this is the first time that I've saw any significant southern rust. Mm-hmm. Now, does that say we will not see it again for another 25?
It just depends on what the wind is.
Exactly.
I mean, it's got to blow up from Texas.
Right.
I was just going to mention that because it's like I saw more common rust and more southern rust than I have seen ever. And really, honestly, I had to look it up on the Southern Rust.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think that's what that is. Because I had a couple guys ask me that. I was like, "What is this?" It's
Right.
because a couple guys that were using some more of your premium products and. Not that on your side, somebody else's, but he's like,
Right.
but he's like, well, there's still rust out here. What's up with that? And it's like, well, it kills it, but I mean the damage is done. I mean it's just going to stay there. It's not going to spread anymore. But
Right. Year in and year out, we'll have common rust and
Yeah.
have almost nothing from a yield standpoint. Southern rust is the big, bad, ugly cousin here.
Yes.
That can really hurt your yields.
I got a buddy of mine from college that farms in southeast Iowa.
Yeah.
And I always use him as my indicator of if you want to see weird stuff, go to southeast Iowa. I don't know if you listen to
I
him, but-
mean, he made me listen to this
maybe
one,
he is
Chad.
listening to it, but we'll see. I may have to tell him that to listen to him because I gave him a shout out. But he's like, he made the comment about, I sent him a picture of it. I'm like, God, I think we got Southern Rust. He's like, good luck.
Yeah.
He's like, it can knock 30, 40 bushels off down here if it's hit right. It's like, oh my goodness. Well, hopefully it isn't
Right.
that bad here.
But we also, because of our, especially June being wet, we pulled the trigger on a lot of fungicide acres, just knowing that we were going to have tar spot.
Yes.
So we had some protection out there, and the big key on most diseases, if you can be just ahead of them instead of playing catch up, you're usually going to win that game.
Well, I tell guys this all the time when we're talking like northern corn leaf blight. I got some guys that they don't want to pull the trigger on the tassel spray until they see something. It's like there's like a 2-week incubation. Same with tar spot. I mean, it might be out there for 2 to 3 weeks before we see a symptom. It's like, well, that 2 weeks it's doing damage.
It's exactly right. Yeah.
And it's getting systemic and it's going to spread. I mean, biggest thing is just try to get it early.
And I mean, I think you can kind of look at that system the same way as you're dealing with weeds.
Oh, yes.
That's a good correlation.
A lot of these chemistries we want to be out there. They're pushing and pushing to be out there before the weeds become a problem. I mean, I think part of that mindset of wait on your fungicide could come from the fact guys want to wait to spray their weeds. I mean, we want to be ahead of it. We want to stop the problem before it persists out there in the field and does the damage. Like you said, the disease can be with the inoculant period or whatever. It can be in the plant for 2 weeks. I mean, the weeds, you could have a weed sit in your field for a week, and that's robbing from you right there.
Yeah.
That darn Roundup Ready mentality is still getting us.
It does. It does. I think
you're pulling on your mic there.
your foot is pulling on that.
Oh, we're hitting a chord.
Yep.
That's what that was.
That was it. Technical difficulty.
Little technical
there, yeah. difficulties.
We're fine.
But yeah, let's veer into weed control.
Yeah, let's do that.
The pre-emerge herbicides. So what does it take for successful results? Usually good, steady, consistent rains from the moment you apply them for the next 6 or 8 weeks. That keeps those chemicals in the soil solution. They need to go in the solution into the plants, and we really had a good environment for that, as long as you weren't in those areas that had that 5-inch rain that pushed them too deep in the soil.
Yeah. I thought our pre's worked wonderful this year.
Yeah.
And honestly, it didn't matter what products. Obviously, the products that had more like a group 15, added to it additional, I think those worked wonderful. Your PPOs worked awesome this year because, we had plenty of moisture. 23, different story.
Right.
We just didn't have the moisture in 23 when we were spraying. But I thought I got to the point with a couple guys, they're like, well, do we got to spray or post pass? Yes. Yeah. Yes, you do. You got to get the dual out there, or you get your, your whatever out there, and layer that residual
You're struggling
back out.
to think of the name of my products, aren't you?
No. I'm just trying to be equal opportunity. I'm just giving you crap.
Just giving you crap.
Kind of like you said. On the post side, it's like I was having that same thought. This is the first first time I've seen it. It's like these residuals work so well. Looking at the calendar right now, it's it's time to spray a post pass on this stuff, and there's nothing for weeds out there.
Yeah. Well, and guys still struggle with that. It's like spray black dirt. It's fine.
Right.
You're going to be just fine with that. That's part of the reason why we put a metolachlor with the tank mix and those things like that. And okay, fine, you may be, on the Enlist, you still got some and I'd rather kill a water hemp that tall on the camera, that tall, not this tall. That's not a 4-inch weed. We're talking about growing points. Somebody mentioned that last week at our thing. I mean, 60 growing points, 50, 60 growing points on a weed that size?
Yeah,
about like that.
Yeah.
You bet.
Especially with water hemp. I mean, that's the one that we struggle with the killing all the growing points.
Right. So let's think through what our pre-emerge is doing and is supposed to do. With your pre-emerge herbicide, you're getting 95% control. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got to time your post-emerge to control the 5% escapes.
Yes.
Not plan the post-emerge for when that pre-emerge totally runs out of gas.
Yeah, it's just like anything. I mean, you can't run the car all the way down to empty before you get to the gas
That's right.
station.
You got to be at the gas station before it's empty. And I love that analogy. That's great. You're gonna start using that one.
Yeah, I got a new driver at home. I keep on harping on her, just make sure that gas tank is somewhat full. So
Well, that's good. So our post-emerge, we want to kill the escapes with whatever, and then we want to add more residual so that keeps going through the season. Now, with your June rains, your post-emerge residuals would have performed quite well this year as well. Contrast that to the year before, and maybe even the year before that, where we couldn't buy a rain in June to save our life. We had a lot of people just said, "Well, forget this. I'm just going to go 2 post passes." That residual still gives us. Think about it. Our contact only gives us a day of control.
yes.
We put a residual, it gives us a month of control. So, and you're probably spending less on the residual than you are on the contact.
Correct.
So, let's give the good return and get that residual in our post pass. Just do it soon enough that it's able to get into the soil before that next flush comes so it can do its job.
The other part is you want to make sure you're not getting too late on the escapes, because that's what we kind of ran into. As wet as it was, we're probably a week to 10 days behind on our post pass because we just physically couldn't get out.
Exactly, yeah. So it's interesting. The last several years in some of my demonstration plots that I put out, I've tracked water hemp. This is the key weed. And you've all heard water hemp grows an inch a day,
Yes.
right? That doesn't take place until it hits about 3 inches.
Okay.
Okay, so when you till the soil, you essentially start the new germination. At 2 weeks after tillage, assuming it's into May and the temperatures of the soil are warm enough for water hemp to come, at about 2 weeks, water hemp will be about a 1/2 inch. At 3 weeks, it'll be about 1 inch. And then when you hit closer to 4 weeks after tillage, then it'll be about that 2 to 3 inches. Okay.
Yep.
So there's a window in there that's approximately 2 weeks in length that you've got that 1/2 inch to 2 inch weed. All right. Then give me one more week, and it's 12 inches.
Yeah.
So once it hits about that 2 to 3 inches, it stops, just plodding along, and it just ratchets up as far as the growth. That's when it's putting on so many new growth points, and we got to kill every growth point to have a dead plant.
Yep.
You're putting on so many new so quick that they get ahead of us.
Yep.
So we want to be ahead of that time. Yep. That's why we want to spray, the 2 inch water hemp, not the 4 going to 14.
Yeah.
And that makes me think too of talking about the water hemp, how it grows. Someone that may not use a pre-emerge, something with a residual, they're planning on that post pass, gave that water hemp time to grow, and then now you're coming at it with your post pass attacking larger weed.
Yeah. And maybe something that isn't going to even touch it either. I mean,
right.
As good as a product like an Enlist is, 12-inch water hemp. Yeah.
Well, we have to kill off 60 or 70 growth points.
So it comes down to contact and coverage and all those things like that. And, so, I mean, if you just throw a straight glyphosate in that tank, I mean, good luck. I mean, you might as well get the Liberty ordered and do about 20 to 25 gallons per acre, because I mean that's about the only thing that's going to give you a heck of a chance.
Yeah, and we're seeing that shift happen quite a bit here, Chad. I'm going to say 3 years ago, it was 90% Enlist mixed with Roundup,
Yeah.
and 10% Enlist mixed with Liberty.
Some of that was a cost thing.
A lot of it was that, and some of it was availability.
And availability. Yep.
And now it's not quite 90-10 the other way, but it's certainly 80% Enlist with Liberty and 20% Enlist with Roundup.
So how long's Liberty or Enlist been out? About 7 years now? 7, 8?
That'd be about 7 or 8 years.
Okay. So like 2018, 2019, I had a couple growers that were actually doing Enlist Liberty right from the beginning, because they had a couple train wrecks in a few scenarios. Cleaned it up pretty good, but then, obviously $100 Liberty kind of dampens everybody's spirits at that point, and now we're finally getting back to where we were pre-COVID. It's, and supply-wise too,
right?
Thankfully, but yeah, I think some of those guys are going to kind of have to go back to it. I think we've done an admirable job staying ahead of some of that stuff during that time period. So I think we'll be okay. But yeah, it took a while.
We spent a little time talking about pre-emerge and what it takes, that nice steady rain to keep that active in the soil. Post-emerge has its, sweet spot too. Weed size obviously is a big part of that. Spray volume, water volume is another big part of that. The simple answer is the more water, the better.
Yes.
But a third factor that we saw this year, which eluded us the last couple years, is relative humidity.
Yes.
So think of the humidity levels this year. In June, most days the humidity was above 50%. In 2023,
it was like 30.
Oh yeah,
it was like Arizona weather.
It was. So when it's dry, you have low humidity. That weed gets really defensive. So we have trouble getting all that spray into the weed. So the performance reflects that. And when it's dry like that, we can help our cause by using amped up adjuvants.
Yeah, like an MSO or a crop oil or something.
Yeah. And we found with Enlist, the methylated oil is the best, and especially through 2022 and 2023, when the humidity was so low, we just had the best results when those methylated oils were in the mixture, and so we're just saying let's just put it in every time.
Yeah, I mean from the beginning. We're pretty fortunate around here. One of the guys that kind of was one of our trainers was Steve Snyder.
Oh yeah,
and he actually lives up in the Lanesboro area, but he was one of your main product guys on the Enlist side. He was one of the first guys to kind of say, "Hey, it's not our recommendation, but this is kind of my recommendation, crop oil." And this is like 2018, 2019. And we've been kind of on that boat from the beginning on that, and we've got more guys doing the MSO here the last couple of years because of
it's just
like
a step better than that even.
Yeah, but I mean, I was very, very grateful we had, good people regionally that were doing research on that. It's like, the most trouble I've had is the guys that did not do oil, so put in the oil. I know it might burn a little bit. It might have some leaf tissue burn on it, but we're not burning the heck out of things either.
Yeah, and let me qualify that just a little bit. I did some of the demos that I've done. We were starting to get questions on crop responses and some of these things. So I went out with don't try this on your own farm, but I did a 4x rate of each of the individual things in the mix, and then that would be like a 100-foot strip, 10-foot wide. On 50-foot, I came back a week later and did it again. So some of these had an 8x use rate, just looking at crop responses. So Enlist alone at 4x, you didn't really see any results on the beans. At 8 times the use rate, you'll see a little bit of speckling, okay? Kind of like freckles on my arm, Yeah. With Roundup, 4x and 8x, nothing. You couldn't see a thing. With Liberty, 4x and 8x. At the 8x, we've got some yellowing.
Oh, yeah.
It took about a week, and then the yellowing was gone. But here's the interesting thing. When I put the MSO at the 4x rate and the 8x rate, it looked almost like Enlist by itself, a little bit of speckling. So now the question is, well, I've seen some fields that look pretty burnt up, okay? Well, the next plot over, I put my residual herbicide.
Yeah, I was just going to say, your dual?
The dual product. It was our brand of Everprex. Yes.
Yep.
At 4X, boy, that's where you started to burn that leaf tissue, and at 8X, you really burnt that leaf tissue.
Kind of looks like a little bit of a Flexstar
It's kind of a Flexstar Cobra look, yeah. And in addition to the residual herbicide, I also put Select. So I had 2 oil-based materials.
Yep.
But here's the thing I want to point out. The crop oils that you sell farmers and the methylated seed oils that you sell farmers, those came onto the market for foliar post-emerge applications, and those are very refined, clean oils.
Yep.
Now let's think of products like Dual or your emulsifiable concentrate residual herbicides.
Yep.
Those came onto the market with, I'm going to say, almost no intention of going post-emerge, foliar.
Absolutely.
These are 40-year-old things. And we didn't post-apply chemicals 40 years ago.
No.
So the purity of the oils and all that was a minor thing. We were more worried about, does it mix with fertilizer? Does it mix with atrazine? Does it work from a soil residual standpoint? And it checked all those boxes. Well, now we've moved those over into post-emerge. There's a little more crop response when you do that.
Well, and we're also in a generic world on that too. I mean, everybody can sell. I mean, I think you and I could probably make our own dual if we had the right products in a bathtub. I mean, maybe I'm being too simple there, but I mean,
you're probably capable of that. I'm not sure I quite can, Chad, but I hear what you're saying.
That.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's doable. Obviously,
It's doable. But you're right. I mean, those products weren't made for that, but we've kind of had to put them in that situation because of what we got.
Right, but by the same token, we can go really exaggerated rates of the methylated oils and the crop oil concentrates and have a very minor effect on the crop.
Yep.
Oh, one other strip that I did, once I went down with my Enlist or my Roundup, I'd come back on the same plot. So I had one with the kitchen sink, everything at 4X and 8X rates. Yeah, that was pretty tough on the beans.
How'd they yield, though?
Well, I never took them to yield,
okay.
but I think there was probably some losses there when it got that high.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talking on, using a methylated seed oil, having something like a dual or, some type of other, oil type based residual, going back to Chad's point earlier, you were talking to some growers who felt, they might not need a post pass.
Yes.
Is there scenarios where we tweak the rate on our oils, go down? I mean,
I don't, Colin, and that's a good question, but I don't recommend going down on that because it's not the primary culprit with a burn. I know we feel better about it, but more so than anything, if it's warm and humid and we have good uptake conditions, you're more likely going to see more of that. Or if it's really hot, we start getting above 90-degree temperatures.
Yeah, what is that like between your temperature and your humidity at like 150?
Yeah, you start hitting those numbers together. But I kind of want to be a little bit cautious on that because if on hot temperatures, I'd go with that. But when the temperature's 70 degrees
and you got high humidity,
then you don't necessarily have that effect because it's just really lush and good growing conditions, and they metabolize the chemicals so fast under those conditions. Yeah. But when it gets above 90, okay, why do we stop counting degree units after 86?
Because the plant shuts down.
Plants shut down. So if I get chemical in and then a plant shuts down, now I'm not metabolizing that, and somewhere it's got to detoxify that.
Yep.
It's kind of like taking 6 shots of whiskey instead of 1. I mean, one of them is going to have more effect than the other.
Yep. Let's pivot a little bit into the bug side of things. Aphids on the soybeans kind of made a comeback this year.
It's probably been 6 or 7 years since we last saw aphids, and things will cycle, but they came in this year.
And late too. I haven't ever seen them that late.
I would say I remember the year because we went to see my brother in Virginia. And we were driving like over Labor Day weekend, that time frame, and they came in that year, but that was probably 2013.
Okay.
2014.
We didn't have much of a crop in 13 around here.
Right. But prior to that, you could set your calendar for August 25 and aphids disappeared.
Yes.
That year, they didn't even show up until August 28, 29, 30. We thought we dodged it. And I mean, the phone was constant from here to Virginia.
Yeah.
People were calling me, constantly. What do we do now? We thought, well, it's pretty late, but man, we're dry. That year it was really dry.
It was wet early because I think 13 obviously was a disaster area around here. We had a lot of prevent in southern Minnesota.
Okay.
But 14, we were kind of primed for the same thing because we didn't get the planting done until like the end of May for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So our crop was probably 2 to 3 weeks behind around here because of that. So that's probably part of why we saw that in 13, 14.
Right. But when it's dry, that's when aphids just really, eat your lunch.
Yes.
Because they're taking moisture out, and I'm already moisture limited, and that's a bad combo.
Mm-hmm.
But how we've managed aphids since they showed up in 2003, and that is the year they showed up in Iowa. It's 2003.
I was an intern in Adams that year.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the heck is this?
We've been hearing the stories. They'd been in Ohio and Toronto and some of those areas a year or two before. But they showed up here in 2003. And from then until they stopped showing up, 5 years ago, what we've been doing is pyrethroid. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I switch amongst pyrethroids. You're still using a pyrethroid.
Yes.
And Minnesota has had a fair amount of pyrethroid resistance these last 5 or 6 years.
And maybe even further back, too, because I think Ken Osley was finding it maybe early mid-teens, like 2010, 2012.
Yeah, but we weren't affected here.
It was
so
kind of
much.
in pockets. It was kind of up in that like the Blue Earth area, and I kind of attributed a lot of that to there's a lot of canning crops in that part of the country.
Oh, right.
So there's probably like a low level pyrethroid in the air atmosphere.
Well, and they're how often do you spray sweet corn? How
lot.
often do you spray field beans?
They're spraying all the time.
So that's going to help get that started, but. Not having seen it, aphids, for a few years, well, okay, we got aphids back. Let's just, hit it with pyrethroids. And they just weren't, we're just finding areas. It just wasn't cutting it.
Yeah. I don't know what you saw in your area up north there, but what I saw was spots where it worked really well. They're all dead as a doornail.
Yeah.
And then 5 miles away, they're thicker than heck.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I guess July comes around and, you're looking at fields, and my biggest thing each summer is when do I see the first aphid? And I think this year was July 7th. I saw the first aphid, and it was actually in an area where I didn't expect it. So then from there, I went and traveled to some of my more hot zones, couldn't find anything. For me, I think we were spraying for aphids probably July 25th timeline.
Yeah.
And, there was a lot of fields that maybe didn't get sprayed until, a little bit later in August. And, they were definitely scenarios where in July they had to be sprayed. I mean, the populations were increasing, fairly quickly. And
Let me ask you this. Does everybody use a seed insecticide?
Yes and no. There's enough of it that's being used, but I think that's contributing to some of the lower pressures early. But not probably everybody, no.
Okay. And if you have a mix of those that do and those that don't, then I'm going to say the first place to scout is going to be the ones that don't, because those seed insecticides, they delay the onset of that. I think they've been proven to do that pretty well.
Well, heck, some of the products that we're using post-applied have those products in there.
Exactly.
There's products with Gaucho and Cruiser and everything like that, and Poncho in mixes. So we're seeing a lot of that.
Right. So that's an alternative mode of action, but I'm going to caution, going down that path with the neonicotinoids, only because that's our foundation for our seed applied treatments. So that sort of segues me over here to the ISO class, the Ridgeback and Transform materials that we brought on the market a few years ago. So we're not using those as a seed treatment, but that's a different mode of action than the
Correct.
Than the straight pyrethroid treatments that foliar have been applied since 2003. Well, I'm going to back up. We used the straight pyrethroids 3 and 4 years prior to that because of bean leaf beetles.
Well, I was going to say something about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get off my soapbox on this one. I think we took a step back about 5 years ago on the aphid treatment, and that has nothing to do with you guys on that, but it was a product that you guys had with cobalt and Lorspan. We got that taken off the market.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Boy, did we take a step backwards on that.
Right.
Because, that was my standard.
Yeah.
You know, especially if it was aerial applied or something. I used a lot of cobalt. I sold a lot of cobalt over the years.
Yeah. As much as we wish that was back on the market,
it ain't happening. I know.
We're not bringing it back.
No.
But you can get chlorpyrifos, or the active ingredient of Lorsban, that is available on a limited basis. It has a soybean label. I don't believe it has a corn label.
No, it doesn't.
But it does. We can use it as an aphid tool in soybeans, or just an insect tool in soybeans.
Yeah. I think we found that out kind of late in the season this year that could have been a possibility. But then again, supply.
Supply is a big thing.
Yeah.
So why? Well, there's two reasons why we are out of the Lorsban business.
It's not, you don't make any money on it.
Well, the market shrank so much.
Yeah.
Because of restrictions in some areas where we used to sell a lot. The pile just gets smaller and smaller. So, and it doesn't really fit our long-term vision of. From an environmental stewardship standpoint.
Correct.
So, but there are other manufacturers that are, getting it going. But the problem from an insecticide standpoint is, you got a big run this year, and we need this much, and then the next year you don't need hardly any, and the up and down, and they're not necessarily companies that can pivot and all of a sudden make. A big run, a big amount for a big run.
Yep.
So
let's talk about
part.
the Transform quick. Why you guys have gone that direction?
Well, okay. So Transform is there's really one insect that it controls extremely well, and that's aphids. Mm-hmm. And that's at we'll say an ounce per acre rate of Transform. If we double that rate to 2 ounces per acre, we will also claim stink bug suppression. Okay, so when you're spending $7 or $8 for an ounce of Transform, you're probably not going to double that rate to slow down your stink bugs. And then, what about beetles? Nothing. What about some loopers? Nothing. So we're still combining it with a pyrethroid if you have a full spectrum.
Yep.
But if you are having aphids and just aphids, Transform by itself does a good job of controlling the aphids that are there, but also bringing you some residual control. So there's anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks of good, consistent residual control on aphids. The other big benefit with Transform is because its spectrum is essentially aphids and not much anything else but aphids, we see a lot bigger survivability of beneficial insects that also feed on aphids. So that's also helping the cause if we don't knock them out.
Right.
Now, why would I add another chemical to that? Because I've got mostly it's other insects that say, okay, we have got to take care of our Japanese beetles, or we've got to take care of our woolly bear caterpillars, or other ones that are just coming in and with a vengeance. That's where you want the pyrethroid with it. So we offer a product that has a pyrethroid with it. It has bifenthrin with it, and then we sell that as the Ridgeback. Mm-hmm. And I'd say Ridgeback still makes up 80-90% of our sales in that marketplace. Transformed by itself, 10 to 20.
Yep. Let's just kind of go into just some quick hitters because we're probably running out of time here. But so looking ahead into 25, we're definitely going to have to kind of watch the pocketbook. Guys are, where things are at. It's tough. It is. But how do we make sure that we're, putting together a full package, herbicide, insecticide, fungicide, without breaking the bank and trying to focus on a return on investment?
Well, I think the key that you hit on is the return on investment. Okay, so when you plant seed, let's say corn, why aren't we planting 70,000 plants per acre?
It's not cost effective.
It's not cost effective. You probably lose yield in the process because there's way too much competition.
Yep.
So we plant 35,000, give or take, and keep the competition away. Weed competition is going to eat your lunch if you don't control the weeds. And the critical time to keep the weeds out is until that corn reaches about waist high, knee high to waist high. We got to keep those weeds at bay. So how we do that is using a good pre-emerge herbicide and then coming back with a good post-emerge that kills, those 5 or 10% escapes and gives us more residual to take us on through. And that's where we've started with our residual pre's using things like Keystone, Sure Start,
Surpass.
Yeah, and those are I'm going to say medium priced products.
Yep.
And then follow post, with effective combinations that get us multiple modes of action, like the Resicor, that you get 3 different families to help with weed resistance, and then also giving us contact and residual to take us through with the rest of the season. We've amped up our Resicor this year as starting to be available as Resicor Rev.
Yep.
So essentially what we've done there is encapsulated the one component that is residual only. We don't need foliar uptake. That's that same component. Remember when we were talking about beans and that component that really whacks your beans? That component's now encapsulated in our Resicor Rev, so there's less effect on existing corn foliage.
And that has been a problem in the past with Resicor.
Yeah, you'll see it once in a while.
Every once in a while.
And okay, we want to increase our control, so we put a little extra surfactants and oils and things with that, and there's a little bit of an extra effect. And if the weather at that time, which a lot of times it's wet and humid, there's a little bit of a multiplying effect there.
Yep.
So we're going to encapsulate that acetochlor, provide a little extra safety in that process.
So kind of the long story is just plan for success, or we're kind of at that time frame right now where we're planning for next year. I mean, talk with your agronomist, have a designated plan, what you're going to do in the fields, what set some expectations. I think that's a big one. I mean, we don't want to shorthand ourselves when there's huge potential crop out there, and we don't want to hurt ourselves for the future to come with not having a solid plan.
Yep. And there's some benefits too. I mean, you do have your offer on the Corteva side with the chemistry, where you're getting up to 10% right up front off of the bill, which is kind of handy to have. So.
Yeah, and that applies to the entire chemical line, and I'm going to say it applies no matter what brand of seed you plant. I see you with your decal hat on, but
I honestly forgot I was wearing.
Oh, that's fine. But it's a good example. I mean, a farmer can plant that brand of seed,
and that's what I do at home. I mean that I mean
well, that's what you sell. I understand
that. So for me, Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure you get that on camera, Chris.
Get that on camera, Chris.
But you could be planting that and then use Corteva chemistry and still get the 10% on the Corteva chemistry.
Yep.
There are additional incentives if you plant the Brafant seed.
Yep.
Or if you plant Pioneer seed. Then there's an extra 5% on top of that. But those incentives apply no matter what seed you plant.
Yep.
And that the 10% is if you pay for this with cash, but by February 28th.
Right.
There is a financing arm. Kind of think this thing through. If you use our financing, we still give you the 5%, and you can get an extra 5, with a seed partnering up.
Yes.
But it's financed. But there's an interest charge of prime minus 1%, and I don't even know what prime is. But
I'm not even sure.
Let's say it's 6%. Well, it's prime minus 1, so the interest rate is 5, but we give you 5, so it's like 0% interest without being a 0% interest loan.
Right.
So.
And that's pretty huge right now.
Oh yeah. It's I know a lot of companies have the different incentive things, but ours is we continue to give you the incentive, and if you use the financing, it helps offset basically the interest cost.
Yeah, and the nice thing I kind of like about it is it's upfront. There's none of this figure out after the season's over stuff. It's done is done. I think we're going to kind of leave her at that. I think we got through about 95% of what I was thinking of. So I appreciate the conversation on that, because I think we could have probably talked for another half an hour, but I think Chris needs to get going. So
All right,
it's at an hour. I mean, usually that's kind of what I always figure is where we need to kind of be at. So Ron, thank you for coming up today. I know it was an early. What time did you leave this morning?
Well, I was at Ames.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I was at Des Moines.
Okay.
Yeah, if I'd have come from home, I'd had to left at about 4-ish.
Because I was telling him on the way down, I sent you the kind of the outline, and I got the response back and looked at my email. 3:45. What does this guy
Chad,
sleep?
you just wait till you get to be my age. And I think you're going to find that 3 and 4 in the morning is kind of a normal, get up time.
That's gonna be kind of peaceful in the morning.
It probably
you got
is.
your own time to kind of do.
You got about
what
3
you want.
hours before everybody else kind of gets up.
Yeah, that's right.
So-
But don't try to give me a phone call and have a conversation at 7 or 8 at night, because I'll probably talk, but I will have no recollection of it whatsoever.
You can only do one.
Exactly. Well, thank you for coming up.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. It was a wonderful conversation, and we'll have to do this again.
Yeah, it sounds good. And Colin, it's nice to have you on board and working on this end of it too.
I'm excited to be here and look forward to what the future's got to come with this. So.
All right, so I got a few outros here. Just make sure we're following us on social media, on our Facebook page, Northern Country Co-op. Oh my gosh, I did that. That's a wrong company.
We can edit.
Nexus Co-op. I'm sorry, Chris. I haven't done that at all when I've been doing this.
Yeah,
my bad. Nexus Cooperative. Instagram. We also have Instagram at Nexus Co-op, and Twitter, or the former Twitter, now X, Nexus_Co-op. And then if you're watching this, we will have this on YouTube as well. We're there on Nexus Co-op as well. And we can also listen to this on our website. We have a player on our website at NexusCoop/podcast, and then anywhere you can get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, just to name a few. So it's all there. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.